Well, good evening, everyone. Great to have you here. I am Ed. I'm one of the co-founders of 𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗶𝗲. We've got Susanna, who is my other co-founder, also on the call. And between us, we hope we'll teach you a little something about customer journey maps. So just a few housekeeping bits and pieces before we get started. Yes, we are recording this. So if you join late or you have to leave early, we'll be sending you a link where you can see the whole thing. The benefits of being here live, though, is that you do get to ask questions, and we'd encourage you to do so in the chat. Please stick them in the chat, and we'll get through to them as soon as possible. And that's probably like the best way to kind of make sure it doesn't disrupt things as we go through. And what else was I going to say? Oh, the templates that we use and the links, they're all going to be linked to both in this document, which we'll share with you, and we'll send you a little kind of email roundup, which has the link to the templates and the recording as well afterwards. Final thing I'd say is please can you stay on mute if you're not asking a question or presenting, just so there's not so much background noise for anyone else. So with that, I'm just going to do a very short introduction to 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 before we dive into customer journey maps themselves. So very quickly, what is 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂? 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 gives you the support you deserve as a tech leader. So we are a platform with really practical advice that is super focused on accelerating your career, helping you get promoted, helping you get new jobs. And all of our materials, we make sure that they are immediately applicable, can help you out with your job day to day, and they're comprehensive as well. So they do everything that you need to do in your job. What does that actually mean kind of tangibly? Well, we have courses that you can go through. These are self-paced courses on a variety of different topics. We have a wiki and template library with detailed how-to playbooks and case studies on different things. And then we also have a community Slack where paying members can ask each other for advice. So that's how we provide you with that kind of level of support. Now, what we're going to cover today is customer journey mapping. So this is one of the articles that we've got on the platform. This is actually a free article. You can read the whole thing. And we have two templates here. These are both free to access as well. So we have the version in Miro. We have the version in Figma. I'm going to be talking through the Figma version because I think it's slightly more beautiful. You can access all of these. These give you an example of the kind of quality of materials that we produce. So with that, I'm going to head over to the Figma file and dive straight in. That is not the right Figma file. That was a sneak preview of something we're working on. Right, here we go. Okay, this is the customer journey map. So what is a customer journey map first? Let's kind of start with some definitions before we get into it. So as you can see, just from this kind of like very zoomed out view, a customer journey map is it's a visual diagram, right? It's a visual diagram that shows how a user or a customer flows through a particular process or goes through, reaches a particular goal. And that journey is split up into different steps. And for each step, you're then defining what are the touch points the customer has with your product. And that could be with the digital product. It could be with physical product. It could be with marketing assets. It could be with like real people, customer service agents. And you're also then mapping what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What's their overall impression and mental state? And so what you're doing is by combining those two things, you're saying like, okay, as people go through this process and our product is designed to help them through that process, where are they getting stuck? Where are they, finding it, great? And how do we make the whole experience better? And you can enrich this sort of map then with additional bits of information. So that might be additional insights. It might be provocations, things that you want to consider in the future. It could even be sort of details of like what is the tech stack underpinning these different parts of the flow. So we're going to dive in, like what we're going to do through this session is just talk through how you would actually build one of these and why it's useful, essentially. So what you'll see in the template here, and again, like you're going to get access to these. There's a filled out version here. This is the one I'm going to talk through. And then there's a blank version over here, which you could fill out yourselves if you made a copy. So first thing, if you are building a customer journey map, is to think about the persona. You can see I've neatly, both for my guidance and for yours, I've numbered the steps in the template. So you just follow the numbers will kind of lead you through what you need to do at each stage. So the first thing you're going to do is define the persona, as in you're just going to be really clear who you're talking about. Now, this is an example actually where we're going to look at the purchase flow on eBay. So for eBay, eBay's a marketplace. There's two sides to the marketplace. We're looking at the buyer persona here. We're not looking at the seller persona. The seller persona is going to have a very different flow, and potentially, you know, a small scale seller might have a very different flow from a large scale seller. So when we talk about the persona, that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, who are we looking at here? If you're working on a B2B product, then obviously you might have multiple different kind of roles or permission levels, and you just want to be clear about who you're looking at. So are you looking at a kind of management role, admin role? Are you looking at more of a kind of like agent, you know, individual role? And what are the key things they want to be doing? So with your persona, the key things to sort of fill that out or color that in are their needs. So what's going on in their world? What are they trying to get done? What are their frustrations? What's their motivation? It's these sort of behavioral things that generally provide you with most color. The demographic side of things, oh, it's a 35 to 65-year-old male in blah, blah. I mean, that's generally not that interesting or helpful. So we'd say, focus on the needs and who you're talking about. All good so far? Question. I'm going to check in quite a lot. If you've got questions, as always, drop them in the chat. Okay, fine. So you've got your persona, you know who you're talking about. The question is then, well, what is the flow we're talking about? And what we want to do is define this sort of horizontal axis here. And you can see here, it's divided into a bunch of different steps. So rather than just jumping into defining these steps, actually probably what you want to do is define what is the customer goal or the user goal. So again, if you're B2B, your customer and your user, your end user might be slightly different. Be clear which you're talking about and what is the goal they're trying to get to. This is an e-commerce example, so that's a fairly obvious goal. It's about finding an item and buying it. But you could equally
me and my manager want to do.
Creating a new account.
We can't do it right now because we're doing manual work.
Resolving a support ticket or making it, a support inquiry. You could do it for onboarding or the flow that customers go from viewing, creative ad on Instagram to actually setting up an account. There's lots of different applications here. They can all be quite interesting, but it's something like, how do you get through to something where you want your users to be? I'd say at that point, like, where you define the goal, is also going to define who you build this with. So typically when you build a customer journey map like this, you're not going to do it solo. You can do, and that can be really useful, but you're going to get most value out of these if you're doing this in a cross-functional workshop where you can bring in different people's perspectives, because it's that cross-functional perspective that's going to generate new insights and it's going to help align you. So if you can pull in someone from marketing, someone from sales, someone from customer support, a designer, an engineer, actually the kinds of insight and the kind of detail that you're going to get on this whole board is going to be much richer and much more useful. I'd say you'll know who to invite once you've decided the persona and the customer goal, because then you're choosing people who have a view on that persona. And know how people actually reach their goal and the challenges they have there.
The gun, I tried it with Ben, it doesn't work.
Okay, first couple of questions here. Like
no,
Phil,
I have a gun.
do you have one customer journey per goal?
Yeah.
What if you have identified different types of personas with different frustrations or needs, but the same goal? Can you incorporate this into one map, and how do you consolidate that? Yeah. So
I already tried it.
Again, like,
it's like
I'd say for most product teams that I'm working with or have worked with are working on a single flow.
No, it's like
or
the
maybe
thing
they're
you do for
working on like
fever.
2 or 3 key flows. So let's give an example. At Depop, we had an onboarding team, and that team was responsible from when the user downloaded the app to when they created the account and did their first search. So that whole process of account creation and onboarding was what they were looking at, and that might be a really good example for a customer journey map. If you've got, like eBay, you've got people with, you've got your buyers, your sellers, like very fundamentally different needs, then it's worth having 2 different maps for that. If you're looking at, well, this is a power seller and this is a kind of normal seller, it's going to get a bit more nuanced, and that's really up to you whether it's valuable or not to split that out into multiple customer journey maps. So there's a bit of judgment kind of required in that.
I need more containers like this.
Ed, can you hold on for 1 second? Rebecca, can you
Okay, can I mute Rebecca? Mute? Give me one chance. Let me see. Someone talking. Yeah, done. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. So we've got then our persona. We've worked out the goal. As I say, then typically at this stage, you might want 5 or 6 people in the room to help you then build out the rest. So you said, like, we're going to do this. Okay. First thing to do then is to define these steps. So you see here, for this example, the steps I've got are you're opening up the app, you're on the home screen, then you're going to look for a product. We're calling that sort of search. Then you're going to go onto a product details page. Then you find what you want. You need to log into your account before you can purchase. You actually need to check out. So you need to confirm your delivery and pay. And finally, you're going to get your order confirmation. And that's the goal that I've selected here. Now, again, what you'll kind of quite quickly realize for each of these steps, this is a little bit idealized, because probably when people do a search, they probably try 4 or 5 different searches to get the right selection of items, and they scroll up and down a bit, and then they'll dip in and out of maybe 5, 6, 10 products before they find the right one, and then they might get distracted and make a cup of tea before they go and log in and find what they're going to purchase. So this doesn't need to be sort of literally the steps that they go through. This is sort of can be a little bit more kind of, okay, well, the happy path that people need to go through to get to the goal is this, or the happy path plus, we know people always end up in 1 or 2 of these kind of dead ends. Like, fine, stick those in. So you want to, it's often useful to have, I would say, between 6 and a dozen different steps, and to kind of smooth off the edges around that. If you've got fewer than what I've got here, if you've only got like 2 or 3 steps, then you've really got just not enough granularity for it to be interesting. And similarly, if you've got like 20 steps, 30 steps, it might be very comprehensive, but it's going to be overwhelming in terms of what someone can understand when they're looking at the board. Okay, so again, it's a tool to help you spot where people are getting stuck and think about where you can improve the overall experience. So if looking at it, you just become overwhelmed because there's too much information on it, it's actually not going to do its job, even if it's kind of theoretically more comprehensive. Quick question here from Jeremy. Who do you typically see own the customer journey map? Is it the PM or the designer? Yeah, it could be either, right? I think the best case I've seen of customer journey maps was when I was at Depop, and we actually had physical walls where we'd paste them up. So every team would be in the office, they'd have their team space, and the customer journey map would be pasted up on the wall in the team space. And that was great, right? Because you could see how the teams were thinking and how they understood the customer experience just by walking into the physical space where they were working. And then if you had questions, you could just speak to the people who were there. These days, a lot of teams are working remotely, and one of the challenges you have with customer journey maps is how do you keep them like relevant? How do you actually make sure they're in use? And I think then it can be really helpful to have, yes, one person who's taking ownership and keeping it up to date, tidy, has that sort of caretaker responsibility, but you have the whole team kind of empowered to add comments, notes, thoughts, insights they've come across and update it. And if you are running, you're doing a little kickoff meeting every sprint you're running, or you're doing a retro, then weaving the customer journey map into those check-ins can really keep it front of mind and can kind of like provide an accountability point to update it. So you can sort of say like, okay, this sprint, what did we learn? What are we going to change on our customer journey map? Like, what does that mean for the things that we're thinking about next? Okay, so you're then through your steps here. You've got your persona, you've got your goal, you've broken down the steps to getting to your goal into different sections. So you've kind of defined this horizontal axis, and now you're going to start filling this out. Now, what I like to do is effectively almost like fill it out row by row. So I'll define like what each row is, and then I'll go through the goals and fill it out. And what I'm going to start with are the touch points, because these are the ones that are, it's almost fact-based, right? It's, what is actually happening. And I'd say a really good way of doing this, if you can, is to put different screenshots, and that might be of the app, of the website. It should include things like, oh, if they're getting an email, what's the email that they click on, and what does that look like? If they've got to take a call or they're getting a verification code, maybe you want to include that. But if you provide some visuals, then this immediately comes to life, and you're like, oh yeah, I know what the search screen looks like. I remember that, right? It provides you with that visual kind of basis for what you're discussing. But I'd say, like, don't just restrict yourself to the digital product. Do think about the emails, the physical touch points, the phone calls, all that side of stuff, because from the customer's point of view, they do not see the divisions in your organization, right? They just see, how am I interacting with my bank? And if interacting with your bank is like really painful because they've got a mobile banking app and then they've got an authentication app, but then sometimes you have to get a text message or an email or call someone up from customer service, then actually being able to see all those different layers and how their customer experience is made up of all those different bits, that's the value, right? So you do want to like think about all the different touch points people have got. The other thing you can do, and you can see I've done up here, right, is you can add in the user stories. So yes, there's probably an overarching user story where people are trying to, get to their goal. So as a buyer, I want to buy an item. Great. But also the different steps here, there's probably more tactical goals that the user has. And noting these down can give you a little bit more clarity of what people are doing. So these you can infer from what's actually happening at each stage. And you might also fill it out from qualitative research, user testing, that sort of thing. So, for search here, we've got, overall, I'm looking to find the item that I want to, but I can't have got these secondary needs. Maybe I want to be able to refine my search in certain ways by price or by category. I want to know if listings are organic or paid. I want to know what the ratings are for an item. So noting down some of those use cases can make a lot of sense as well. Yeah, and just going back to that point of touch point, 𝗵𝗵𝗂𝗄𝗃 making a great point there, that another way of doing this is you can actually have like one row for each different function, like in your org, and you can then get, you know, different people from different parts of the org to fill out their row. So you've got your marketing person saying, okay, where do the ad creatives come in? You've got your CRM person who's explaining where the emails and the push notifications come in. You've got a customer service person kind of like telling you where all the different touch points are. And then as everyone adds in the bit of the experience they're responsible for, you start to get this overarching customer-centric viewpoint, which is really what you're trying to understand. Okay, so that was step 4. That was add in the customer touch point. So as I say, that's kind of like what is the reality that customers are faced with, and you're doing that from the customer's point of view, not your point of view as a product manager, a designer. So once you've got that down, then you're going to start moving on to this bit, the customer thoughts and feelings. So step 5 here. And here, these are going to be very much informed by user interviews, user tests, but you can also start with hypotheses, right? So you might start with saying like, hey, I think, when I go through this flow myself, this is how I feel, if I'm honest with it. This is where I get frustrated. This is what I think is really cool. That's fine. Just be clear that that's a hypothesis, right? And then as you go and speak to customers, try and validate whether that hypothesis is actually right. Is that actually where they get annoyed? Is that actually what they're trying to do? Or are they feeling slightly differently to how you perceive it? And you might then pull out different, ideally you can use pull quotes, or you can kind of synthesize different bits of feedback that you're getting to fill this out. So again, you're hearing, I've split this out by positive quotes, negative quotes, so you've got questions. Oh, am I looking at paid ads? Are these the best items? OMG, there's so many autocomplete options. Which do I pick? As I say, that there's lots of different ways you can get these data points. If you are doing NPS pop-ups or CSAT pop-ups in your product and you have a free text option, you might get quotes there that are, relate to different parts of the experience, or even that you can deliberately kind of inquire about different parts of the experience. Like, you're doing a pop-up on the search page saying, how do you find search, not how do you find eBay overall, that sort of thing. But your standard way of doing this is just, running users through this flow, like watching them, seeing their screen, seeing their face. Ideally, you're in the same room, right? You might even be, like go on site and see them wherever they are. If it's a B2B thing, watch them do it, and get them to talk about how are they thinking, how are they feeling, where do they get frustrated. If you're doing this in a B2B context, then this might not just relate to your product as well. If you're watching something someone do something, then there will be points where they copy paste something from your platform into a spreadsheet and back again, or they write down a code they need to do later, or the file name or something. And those insights, the ones that don't happen on your product, are always the most powerful things, because that's where there's a real need where you're like, wait a sec, this person's doing something crazy where they're copying this file name in 3 different places, and actually there should just be a button in our product that allows you to do that automatically. The other thing that I've done here, which is quite fun, but is obviously like a little bit subjective, unless you've got really nice sentiment tracking, is kind of putting in what is the sentiment. So like, how do they feel? I'm like, okay, searching, they feel okay. They get onto a product page, it's okay. Oh no, wait a sec, this is really bad. There's just too much information here. There's all this seller stuff, and there's like text in 3,000 different font levels, and it's all a bit confusing. That doesn't feel great. Then I'm going to log in, and that's quite simple because it can use my socials. Okay, that starts to feel a bit better. And then I get to check out, and it's one touch, and I just love Apple Pay myself, and it's really easy. Great, that feels super. And then I get dumped on this screen, and I'm like, wait a sec, what's going on? And I start to, have I even bought this thing? What's happening? Where's the confirmation? Maybe that doesn't feel good. So again, you can kind of subjectively put it in there. I think some teams like doing this, and that helps them empathize with the customers, with the users. Other teams find this all a bit wiffly waffly and not data driven enough, and it's a bit distracting. So it's everything on this is a little bit subjective. There's no right way of doing customer journey maps. This is really like, what are the layers? What are the kind of bits of information that help you get that empathy with your customers and therefore come up with good ideas for how to improve the experience? I'm just going to finish off this last section before I come back to Mark's question. So having done those 2 bits, so you started to fill this out, you've got your touch points, you've got your thoughts and feelings. I've then got this kind of, further enrich the map, pretty vague. But yeah, you can add other bits and pieces onto it as well. So what you'll see in this case is I've got some insights. So I've got some, behavioral, data-driven facts, charts, one-line sentences that I've pulled from different places that give me a different sense of what's going on. That can be really useful. I've got some provocations. Those are sort of like, how might we statements? How might we do this? How might we do that? These are the things that maybe I'm thinking about as a team. Maybe I've just got some feature ideas, which I'm kind of noodling on, or stakeholders are mentioned. And, I want to keep the stakeholders happy by kind of showing them that, we're really actively considering them hard. So stick those on. Another layer I like to add on is your kind of tech stack. So are you doing this? Do you have third-party services that are helping you? So is your search, is that a proprietary build? Are you using 𝗂𝗲𝗄𝗧? Are you using something else? Okay, you've got your login integrations here. So obviously you've got Facebook, Google kind of as third-party providers there. Like this, just mapping out the different tech services that you touch on can really help you understand the technical complexity, and particularly for engineers, that might be useful for them to be like, wait a sec, if we really wanted to kind of tear apart the search results, actually that's currently broken into like 5 different services at the moment, and maybe we need to consolidate that, or maybe we need to split apart different services. So it can help you understand some of the technical implications as well for doing the changes that you want. Okay, so that, but like I say, the layers you choose, that's going to be personal preference to some degree. We've given you a bunch of ideas here. What you want to end up with is this really rich, customer-centric, multi-dimensional viewpoint of what customers are seeing and how they're feeling. So they can then like look at, okay, where can we focus? So digging into some questions. So Mark asks, what's your favorite way to pinpoint high impact bottlenecks? Is it based on sentiment, frequency of insight, type of insight? Yeah, I mean, as with all product work, this is going to be a little bit of judgment, right? Because some people will say, I really like the qual stuff. The quotes really bring this alive. Some people are going to prefer kind of leaning on data-driven insights where they can really say, actually, we know there's a drop-off here because only, we go from 20% of people on this step to like 3% of people on this step. What I've tended to find is that as you fill this in, you start to get, it's the act of filling it in that helps marshal your thoughts and helps you realize where are the opportunities. And it's one of those things where you go like, wait a sec, I've been in a couple of customer interviews which people really hate this step. Can actually we see that there's a data drop off, in the data, in the tracking, can we see there's a drop off between this step and the next one? If yes, great. Okay, we've validated that qualitative insight. If no, was that just a sampling error where I happened to get 2 people who were really frustrated, or is this something where we need to dig a bit deeper? So I wouldn't say there's a kind of like silver bullet here for kind of spotting what's going right and wrong. But it's the process of creating it that works really well. I would say, some companies that are doing this really well, I've spoken to a couple of product teams where they're doing their kind of CSAT, or they're doing kind of satisfaction scores at different points in the journey, and they're doing that very deliberately. And they may well be using some kind of emoji system like this, because if you ask people to rate things on a star rating, then they can often kind of always stick to 5 stars. So if you can make it a bit more emotional, you can play around with the different ways that people give feedback. Is that text-based? Is that emojis? Is that star ratings? So you've got a bit of variability in how you're scoring, and you can really see the differences between the steps. And then you're sampling people at different steps in the journey. Then if you've got enough traffic, you can start to see that actually people are really rating this first step really well, but this other step not so well. So if there was one kind of like favorite technique, that would be it. It would be kind of like doing sentiment analysis at different points of the journey. Emma asks, aside from personas and customer journey maps, are there any other artifacts that you think are key? Yes. So I really love jobs to be done. I really love opportunity solution trees. We've got another webinar on opportunity solution trees. You can look it up on our YouTube channel, which you'll get the link to in the roundup for this. So that is sort of it. So like, if you've got to that point, right, then you'd find your persona, worked out the goal, you've worked through all the steps to get to that goal, put in the put in the touch points, put in how people think and feel, and then kind of enriched it with any other data you want to show. Like, okay, so what? So then I'd say it's really useful to kind of include as a kind of final step, something like this, to kind of like areas of focus where you can say like, okay, when we look at this as a team, this whole board, what are the conclusions that we get to? Like, where are the areas that we want to focus on? And this might form then the kind of the basis of your strategy or your OKRs. This is a kind of like, hey, actually, what we're noticing like across all the comments or like all the different steps is that people really care about trust. They really care about simplicity. They really care about the discovery step, the search step. That's where we think if we focus, we can make a lot of impact. And then you should also, I would say, like, if you're seeing the sentiment and the data here in your customer journey map, you should be able to model that out in an impact model and start to get a sense of, is there value then if you solve those things? Which I think 𝗵𝗵𝗳𝗶𝗲, I hope I'm saying your name right, is I got a question here. We should be able to put dollars into these various stages as well. Or should we be able to put dollar values into these stages? Likely within the insight section based on the drop-offs count. X% drop-off at this stage might mean we're losing X dollars. Yeah. Yeah, and making the point that, that's a really great way of getting the attention of execs. So yes, absolutely. And there's different ways of doing that. So if you're doing like, I feel like I'm cheating slightly by using an e-commerce funnel here, because e-commerce is probably the simplest funnel you'll get. But if you've got a consumer or e-commerce funnel that ends in a purchase, then you should be able to say something like, okay, for every 1,000 people we put in, 100% of people that go in, we end up with 2.1% purchases, and that's worth $127 to us. Okay, how many people make it through each step? And if 100 people is worth $127, like, how many people do we, and we have 50 people at the search stage, we've had 50% drop off. You can almost work out the value of a single user at each level, right? And you can then work out, okay, if we got an increase in the conversion rate from the home screen stage to the search stage, let's assume that user value stays the same. What is the value? Like if we got, not a 50% drop off, but a 30% drop off, and let's assume all the other conversion rates stay the same. Okay, what does that actually mean to the value that we get? Sorry, that's a little bit kind of long-winded way of saying, but I hope that makes sense. That yes, if you can drive this and put some real numbers behind it, it does actually make a lot of sense. Alan is asking, would you apply and adapt this process to a workflow that is not yet live, so prior to any live customer interviews? Yeah, I think you absolutely can. And in that sense, you can do it very much as a process flow and say, okay, when we launch this product, this is how people are going to flow through it. And again, even if you don't know how people respond to it, you can just sense check how all the different layers of the experience come together. How does the website, the emails, the calls, the physical product all come together? Is that coherent? Where do you expect there to be tension points or friction points? What can you do to mitigate those? The other way of using customer journey maps is, rather than documenting what the current state is, you actually use this to drive out your product vision, and you document what the ideal state is. And if you're doing that, you almost want to run this in reverse. So you're still going to define your persona and the goal and the steps here. But instead of saying, okay, what's actually happening and dictating that, you're going to start with saying, like, how do we want customers to feel at each of these stages? What should they be thinking? What should they be feeling? And based on that sentiment, then you can start to ask yourselves, okay, if we want them to feel delight, or, at this stage, we want them to feel amazing, what needs to be true? What does this step look like? Does this step even exist, or can we skip it? And then you can have a bit of a brainstorm. You can do some sketching. That's a really powerful way of then coming up with a vision. And you've got then this very nice kind of storyboard vision, where you can say, like, hey, look, the experience that we imagine and we're going to build towards is actually one where this and this and this happens, and this is the new way that people get to the goal and feels really smooth and exciting. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, comments on customer journey maps? I'm just going to give a little pause at this point. So that is, that's been quite a kind of rapid run through of how to create a customer journey map. Hopefully, good enough for you to get going on your own. And like we say, when you get the templates, you'll have both this example, which you can spend a bit more time looking over, but also a blank version that you can adapt and get going with yourself. So just as a reminder, we will be sending out a little kind of notes for these. That's going to include the links to both the article and these templates. And the article is got a lot more detail than what I will have talked through in these sorts of things. Little question here from Jen: do you ever use in conjunction with jobs to be done? Yeah, so I do. I think jobs to be done is usually a little bit more high level than customer journey maps. So jobs to be done is really useful both when you're early on in the stage of your company. So you're at the seed or Series A stage, that kind of thing, or you're generating a new product, and you're really asking, like, okay, but why is this better than the alternative? Like, what are the alternatives, and what are the ways we're going to be better, and what will people pay for that, and those sorts of fundamental questions. Customer journey maps are then really useful when you've got a bit of a sense of who you are, like what you're doing, jobs to be done wise, and you're actually really diving into the details of, like, well, wait a sec, we need to optimize this flow. where are the friction points and how can we smooth those off? So it's not like they're incompatible, but they do have slightly different uses. So I generally use customer journey maps when the product's a bit more established, and I'd use jobs to be done a bit earlier on when I'm figuring out the basics. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming along, everybody. I'm going to stay on the call just for a couple more minutes if there's any final questions. But as I say, we'll send you a roundup on this. And thank you very much for coming along. Okay, we've got another question here from Suman. In relation to measuring the conversion rate, how should we isolate the external factors which we might not be able to control directly? For example, price of some items, might be the reason why people are dropping off. Yeah, a really great question. I think this is for me why quantitative data is often not that useful without the qualitative data to go with it, because it's really helpful if you can map out the funnel and you go, right, 100% here, 50% here, 28% here, great. You've got a picture quantitatively of the funnel, but that doesn't answer your question, like why people are dropping out. And so depending on your product and your industry, you may be able to find benchmarks and say, oh, okay, we're a social media app. We know that retention should be X, or we're an e-commerce app and we think that conversion rate through checkout should be Y. But more often than not, you're going to have to go and do a bunch of user interviews, get some qualitative data and see what do people like or dislike. And if everyone is like, this is great, this is fine, and you're still seeing a big drop off, maybe that's just the natural drop off, right? Maybe there's not a lot you can do there. Whereas if they're complaining about, they're getting blocked, they're throwing errors, they don't know where the next step is. Okay, well, there's some obvious reasons then that you can go and dig into about, are those the reasons why you're seeing those drop offs? It's rarely clear cut, I would say. And that's both one of the challenging, frustrating bits of product management, but also one of the satisfying things when you get it right.